So, Summer Breeze by Nancy Thayer, Chapter 14. I'll call you, he'd said, but he hadn't called. It had been over a week since that startling, magical, unexpected, lovely sail on Dragonfly Lake. When Natalie and Ben had returned to shore, she had helped him drag the boat up onto dry land, unstep the mast, and fold the sail, both of them working quickly without speaking. What happens next? She wondered. She had been opening her mouth to invite him over for a drink when Brady came whooping out of the Barnaby house, followed by several of his teenage buddies. Brady had rattled out his words so fast he was almost incomprehensible. Mom says we can cook hot dogs tonight, but we're out of hot dogs. Can you go get some? Ben shot Natalie a glance filled with dismay, but his brother didn't notice. Brady and his friends surrounded Ben like enormous, hyperactive jumping frogs, hooting and bumping into one another. Brady continued bouncing on his toes, jiggling all over. And I have my driver's permit, so if you ride with me, can I drive, huh? Yeah, Zach yelled, and the two other boys chimed in. Ben was helpless, encircled by such exuberance. Sure, he said. The boys exploded with cheers and raced for the driveway, knocking and shoving one another as they went. Ben had smiled ruefully. I'm sorry. The heat still trembled between them. It wouldn't vanish easily, Natalie thought. I'm sorry, too. She summoned her courage. Want to come over for a drink after you get back? Yes, I want to, but I can't. I've got something else on. I'll call you. Those were the last words he'd spoken to her. I'll call you. Right. How many times had any woman heard that from any man? Still, she had totally believed he would call her. She hadn't even tortured herself wondering what if that something else he had on tonight was a date with another woman. She'd sauntered into her house, humming an old Beatles song. It was late in the afternoon, but she'd been full of energy. When she was happy like this, she wanted to work. She almost couldn't keep herself from working. There was an oil on canvas by Margaret Foster Richardson, titled "A Motion Picture," painted around 1912, that Natalie had always adored above all other paintings. It was a portrait of the painter moving toward her easel, a young woman with her hair pulled back, wearing glasses and a gray painting smock, holding brushes in each hand, staring intently at the viewer. Her smock rippling with movement, the painting was compelling, dramatic, dynamic. A woman artist, alive, at work. This was what Natalie had always wanted to do, and right now she was in the mood to do it. She had the courage, she had the passion. She went into her studio, and as if on autopilot, put a fresh canvas on the easel. She found mirrors in two of the guest rooms, wrestled them off the walls, lugged them into her studio. She set them up, shoving furniture around to support them, angling them so that when she stood at her easel, she saw her own reflection. She began to work. That was last week. Today, Natalie could not get the painting of herself to live. She turned the mirrors to the wall. She lifted off the canvas and put it in the corner. She paced her studio, chewing on her nails. She wanted to work. She still wanted to work, but she needed a new subject. She didn't want to do oils. She wanted to go back to charcoal. Her charcoal portraits of Petey and Louise were by far the best thing she'd done, and she wanted to keep at it. She wanted to do another charcoal of a man. She needed a man. She'd be damned if she was going to phone Ben and ask him to sit for her. If he had called her as he said he would, it would be the easiest thing in the world for her to ask him. And she knew his schedule was flexible in the summer. And his body was so beautiful, his long limbs an artist's dream. His shoulders so wide and strong, his collarbone, his throat. Maybe she could call him. Wasn't it a new world? Couldn't women call men? Weren't all the silly old rules of courtship thrown out the window? And, besides, this wasn't about courtship. It was about her work. In a daze, she showered, dressed in shorts and a clean tank top, and wandered down to the kitchen for a bagel spread with peanut butter, which she washed down with a glass of juice. She tied on her sneakers and forced herself out into the heat of the day to walk the circuit of the lake. It was always early afternoon when she took her walk. During the week, most houses were quiet, only the hum of air conditioners breaking the silence. Natalie stayed on the shady side of the street, where it was a few degrees cooler under the trees. Occasionally, a brilliant spot of summer flowers would catch her artist's eye, but usually, on this walk, her attention was inward, on her artwork. Today, her mind was on Ben. Pathetic. Her pace quickened as she finished her circuit of the lake and came toward her home. Aunt Eleanor's home, of course, but by now Natalie thought of it as her home. A white SUV passed her and turned into the O'Keefe's driveway. Morgan stepped out and hurrying around to unbuckle Petey. "Hi, Morgan." Natalie jogged up the drive toward her friend. "Hi, Nat." Morgan's son was dozing in her arms. "We're just on our way to nappy time." Her sing-song voice and the look on her face warned Natalie that now was not a good time for a visit. "We just had lunch at the university, and Ben was there, and Dr. Tamaki, who knows everything about nuclear engineering." She touched the SUV door handle, and it slid closed. She lugged her purse and diaper bag and her drowsy little boy up to her house. "See you later, Gator." Her voice was now almost a whisper. Natalie waved, not wanting to break the silence. She walked back to her own house, let herself in, and then stood in the hall, frowning. Morgan had lunch with Ben at the university. Morgan had had lunch with some nuclear engineer. Well, of course, Morgan was a scientist, so that made sense, kind of. But Morgan wasn't a nuclear engineer. She wasn't a chemical engineer. She wasn't even employed. Why would Ben ask her to meet him for lunch? Morgan was married. So Ben wasn't interested in her that way, was he? He certainly wasn't like Slade, who tried to get every woman he met into bed. It had to be a purely intellectual friendship. Still, for one blood-red moment, Natalie hated Morgan. She hated Ben, too. She was so full of anger, she didn't know what to do with herself. In the next moment, she knew she didn't hate Morgan or Ben. She hated herself. When was she going to grow up? Why was she such a basket case? So what if Ben had asked Morgan for lunch? Natalie hadn't come out here to fall in love. She'd come here to paint. What she needed right now wasn't a man. She needed some stimulation, some life, people, city stuff. She took another quick shower and pulled on one of her few dresses. It was black, like everything else she'd worn in New York. Suddenly, she had a fierce yearning for a pretty sundress. Aunt Eleanor was paying her to look after the house, so, for the first time ever, Natalie had some money to spend on herself. Maybe she'd get some new sandals, too. Stop by the used bookstore in Northampton. Perhaps she could find some nice art books. Aunt Eleanor had a few books scattered around the house, but they were mostly thrillers, paperbacks with water-stained pages. As soon as she was in the silver Range Rover, she felt better. She punched it in the classic rock station on Sirius and sang along as she drove. Northampton was a funky little town, its streets trailing away from the dignified campus of Smith College. Mixed among massive fortress-like stone buildings were coffee boutiques, Afghani restaurants, and hole-in-the-wall shops selling tie-dye bedspreads from India. She found a parking spot on the main street and ambled along the sidewalks, the tension flowing out of her shoulders as her eyes filled with the sight of so many young people, men and women, many of them dressed in colorful hippie garb. It was like photos she'd seen of the 70s. At the Mercantile she found several sundresses, in filmy cool prints, priced for a college student's wallet, swirling with color and easy to wear, draped material falling from a sort of rope tied around her neck. She bought 3 and wore the purple one out of the shop. Much better now, much cooler. As she walked, the material belled out and gathered in around her knees, creating her own summer breeze. The used bookstore was around the corner and down the hill. Inside it was cool and slightly dampish, and packed wall to wall with books. She settled in the art section and surrendered to delight. She discovered a book with several Lillian Westcott Hale portraits in charcoal on whiteboard or paper, and a more modern drawing by Margaret Sargent, a fourth cousin of John Singer Sargent, whom Natalie had never known existed. She found a biography written by Margaret Sargent's granddaughter entitled The White Blackbird, and grabbed that as well, and a book called A Studio of Her Own, Women Artists in Boston, 1870 to 1940. She went to the cash register, dazzled with riches, stunned at how inexpensive the books were. Natalie? She turned. Aaron. Bella's boyfriend was holding as many books as she was, and it didn't take more than a second to spot that they were all various histories of San Francisco. Oh, Natalie said. San Francisco. Did you get the job? I'm one of the final three contenders, Aaron said, rather sheepishly. He gazed down at his books. Whether I get the job or not, the city fascinates me. Not just the architecture now, but the way it changed and evolved throughout the city's history. The cashier cleared her throat. Oh, Natalie dumped her books on the counter. Here you are. The cashier herself was a mobile work of art, so covered with tattoos and piercings, she shifted like a hologram of herself as she rang up the purchases and took Natalie's money. Want to get some coffee? Aaron asked as he laid his pile on the counter. Sure. This was just what she loved about the city, just what she needed. Clothes, books, friends with interests that complemented hers. The Golden Gate Bridge, Aaron was saying as they left the shop and headed uphill toward the main street, is both practical and romantic. It's been called one of the wonders of the modern world. Natalie stopped walking and talking. She stared at Aaron. Her blood thundered. You're a man. Aaron stopped, too. He frowned at Natalie. What? You're a man, Aaron. Natalie took a few steps to the left, estimating the depth of his rib cage beneath his shirt. And I really need a man. In a monotone, Aaron replied, You really need a man. She shot a question at him with her eyes, then burst out laughing. I mean for my drawing, Aaron. I want to draw a man. I need a male model. I don't want to sleep with you, for heaven's sake. Aaron hesitated. How long will it take? Just a few hours a day for 4 or 5 days. It will help Bella, Aaron. Think of it that way. She's going to hang my drawings in her shop. Look, we can go home and set up a sketch now. I'll make you iced coffee or give you a drink, whatever you want. Just follow me home, okay? Aaron shrugged. Okay. The studio was cool and quiet. Natalie made an iced coffee for Aaron and one for herself, but she was too psyched to drink hers as she calmly but quickly set up her easel with fresh paper near the table holding her charcoal. Could you take your shirt off? She asked Aaron. He hesitated. Oh, Aaron, come on. I saw you in your bathing trunks, what, 2 weeks ago when we had that picnic and we all swam and played volleyball? Take off your shirt. Aaron took off his shirt. Natalie studied him. Aaron was compact, more fleshy and muscular than Slade or Dam's Ben. His chest was also extremely hairy. She'd forgotten that, and it made the drawing of his pecs difficult. But he had an extremely strong-looking neck, with a powerful sternomastoid running down to his trapezes, and his deltoid muscles bulged. He worked out a lot. Did you wrestle in high school? She asked. Yeah. Aaron was staring at the ceiling, uncomfortable with her inspection. Okay, I got it. Here, sit on this chair. Now, raise your arms and push them back as far as you can, and turn your head to the side and bend it back, too. She showed him the pose she wanted. Aaron wasn't really trying. He was reluctant, as most people were, in unusual poses. You've got fabulous musculature, Aaron. I want to take advantage of your trapezes and deltoids. Those were words he understood. Immediately, his pose improved. Great, that's great. I know it's a strain on your muscles, but you can take a break every so often. Hold it just like that for me as long as you can. It's like Oh, let's say you're being held down by a lion. You're twisting away so he won't get to your face, but your muscles, your body is tensed, ready for one last struggle. You're at that moment, just before you lunge. She drew rapidly, inspired. Her charcoal scratched against the paper. This was going to be awesome. Quickly, she sketched in the broad outline: his profile, his ear, his jaw, his shoulders, stressed and straining, his sturdy chest and abdomen. It was a hard pose to maintain, especially with his arms held out and back, and after a while she could tell he was tiring. Let's take a break. Shake it out. Get up and walk around. Aaron headed for his iced coffee. I've never sat for an artist before. You're fabulous, she told him. Want to see? I think this is the best thing I've ever done, Aaron. It's going to be, she searched for the right word, it's going to be epic and masculine. I'm not just painting roses in a bowl here. Now, Aaron was studying Natalie. He said, You're ambitious. Gosh, yes. She sipped some of her coffee. Not for money, not even for fame. Although, I'd like my pictures to be bought and hung and shown. I'm ambitious for myself, Aaron. For, she waved her arm, indicating her entire studio. For this, I want to keep pushing myself. I want to see what I can do. I never knew until today that I could do something like that portrait of you. Although, you do understand, that's not you on the page. It's something else. It's struggle, or endeavor, or survival, he offered. Yes, survival. That's it. That's what it's becoming. That's what I'll call it. Impulsively, she wrapped Aaron in a big hug. Oh, Aaron, thank you. I'd never have gotten to this without you. Aaron flushed bright red from his chest up his neck to his entire face. You're welcome, he muttered. Oh, God. Memories suffused Natalie. All the times artists she posed for had hit on her, assuming that her nakedness, her willing arc and arrangement of limbs and torso constituted some kind of invitation, assuming that posing was some kind of tactic agreement. Aaron, I'm sorry. I wasn't hitting on you. I promise. I'm just excited. Intellectually excited. Artistically excited. I would never hit on you. Aaron was grinning. You're assuming my reaction was embarrassment. What else could it? Oh, now it was Natalie's turn to blush. Well, Aaron, she began to dither. I'm not saying you're not, or rather that I couldn't be, but come on, you're practically engaged to Bella. Am I? Aaron was no longer smiling. Aren't you? They stared at each other. Natalie did not feel the urgent chemistry she felt with Ben. On the other hand, it was quite possible Ben hadn't felt the urgent chemistry himself. Certainly, he hadn't called her. He'd had lunch with Morgan. But Bella was a friend. A new friend, but a good friend. I don't know, Aaron answered. I was planning to ask Bella to marry me, but frankly, I think she'll refuse because she doesn't want to leave this area. This was between Bella and Aaron. No place for Natalie to intrude. Sit down again, she ordered. I want to work a bit more. Aaron took his position, turning his head away, straining backward. It was impossible for him to talk now, and Natalie was glad. She needed to concentrate on her drawing. Aaron was a classy, good-looking guy. He was strong, confident, kind, easygoing. Bella would be a fool not to marry him. She worked for another 45 minutes, allowing Aaron to stretch at intervals. At last she folded. That's it for the day. I might shade in some background tomorrow. Can you give me some time tomorrow? I've got lots of time until I hear from San Francisco, Aaron told her, his voice slightly muffled as he pulled his shirt on over his head. Tomorrow afternoon, she asked. I'll be here at 1. They thumped down the stairs together. Would you like a drink? She asked. Not today, thanks. Aaron leaned over and kissed her cheek. I'm really proud to be part of this, Natalie. I think you've got quite a talent. Thanks, Aaron. Natalie stood in the doorway, waving at him as he drove away, and she couldn't stop smiling. Chapter 15. Online, Bella ordered a going out of business banner. She placed an ad in all the local papers: the Daily Amherst Gazette, the Valley Advocate, the Belchertown Sentinel, the Penny Saver. She put an ad on Craigslist. She made up flyers on her computer and drove around all the local towns, thumbtacking them up on every bulletin board she could find. Her father called a friend who was a reporter with the Gazette and suggested he write a hometown story about the closing of Barnaby's barn. But Harry Wharton was reluctant. The paper was already full of closings. It was depressing. So Dennis suggested he write about a new business taking over the spot where Barnaby's barn had been, and Harry thought that was a great idea. He agreed to cover the opening of Bella's. Bella dusted each individual item of stock, polished the display cases until they shone, swept and mopped the floor. She was glad to be so busy. First, because this was an enormous change taking place, and she was eager to make it happen, to see it done. Second, because she was driving herself crazy, trying not to think about Aaron and Slade. When she did, her mind went around in circles. No, not even circles. More like one of those weird Escher drawings of stairs that went nowhere and led back to themselves. Plus, she didn't know what to think about Aaron posing for Natalie. Natalie had phoned her the first evening he posed. "Come over after dinner, would you? I've got something to show you." "Well, you've seen it before, of course, but not this way." Well, there was an intriguing invitation. Aaron was having dinner with some colleagues, old friends from college, who were in the area, and Bella was eating dinner at home with her family. She bolted her food and raced across to Natalie's. Natalie was over the moon about this new drawing. "Look," she demanded, gesturing toward the paper on the easel, as if Bella could do anything but look. "My God, Bella, the musculature that man has, the vigorous lines of his torso, the power just shouting from his biceps. It's almost mythic. What a beautiful human being." Bella had swallowed. She'd never thought of Aaron as beautiful. Certainly, he was handsome, but he was short, stocky, hairy-chested, and kind of primitive, she whispered. "Primitive," Natalie echoed. "You're right." Stepping forward, she picked up a piece of charcoal and lightly shaded an area. "I don't know why I suggested this pose. It was spontaneous. I knew at once what I wanted as soon as he took his shirt off. Do you see the line here? His sternomastoid? It's thick, pure." Bella hugged herself with her arms as she listened to Natalie praise the anatom, anatomical parts of her lover's body. It was one of the odder experiences of her life. Natalie spoke so freely, so openly. I knew at once what I wanted as soon as he took his shirt off." "What? Why don't you draw Slade?" Bella asked. She was really curious. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Slade is nothing but bones," Natalie responded contemptuously. She jerked to a stop and pivoted suddenly to face Bella. "Bella, you're absolutely right. Why didn't I think of it myself?" Almost lunging forward, she grabbed Bella in a hug. "You're a genius." Surprised and confused, Bella could only ask, "Really?" "I should draw Slade. In the same pose. Think of it." Natalie was almost levitating. Bella thought of it. Slade, with his shirt off, his neck twisted away, his arms raised, his chest bare. "The difference will be stunning," Natalie burbled on. "Slade is long and lean, and if he has any muscles, they'll be like threads compared to Aaron's." "That's not a nice thing to say," Bella told Natalie. Natalie laughed. "For heaven's sake, Slade's my brother. That's hardly the worst thing I've said about him." She paced around her paper, jabbing forward now and then with her eraser, touching the tip to a line, a shadow. "I'll have to phone Slade, ask him to come stay for a few days." That night Bella slept at her parents'. Aaron phoned her as he was driving home from dinner with his old friends. He told her about them. Both were married and already had children, and asked about her day. "I saw Natalie's drawing of you," Bella told him. It was late. She was alone in her old childhood bedroom, in her twin bed with the pink sheets. "What did you think?" "She's good, isn't she?" Aaron answered. She's really good, Bella agreed. She kind of wanted to pick a fight, to accuse him of something. But really, what could she accuse him of? It wasn't like he'd been totally naked in front of Natalie. And if he had been, should she have cared? She thinks you're beautiful. Bella opted to be pleasant, complimentary, and why not? That was what Natalie had said. Aaron laughed, a deep grumbling in his throat. Honey, men aren't beautiful. She's just an artist, and they perceive stuff differently. If she was painting, oh, I don't know, a mushroom, she'd think it was beautiful. Oh, Aaron. Bella smiled. Her heart was touched by Aaron's instinctive protection of her feelings, as if he didn't want there to be any chance at all that she'd be jealous, that she'd think Natalie was hitting on him, that she'd wonder whether something happened between Natalie and Aaron up in that studio, something not overtly physical, not so much as a kiss. And she found herself thinking of the way Slade kissed her before she got out of the van. And there she was, talking to Aaron and melting all over about Slade. So it was a good thing, a saving grace, that she had so much to do to close her mother's shop and start Bella's. On the second Saturday in July, Bella pulled on a sundress, grabbed a cup of coffee, and drove to Barnaby's barn. Ben met her there as he'd promised. They'd already hung the going out of business banner at the beginning of the week, and it had drawn some people in and moved some inventory out, as well it should have, at 70% off. This morning Ben helped her carry Jim Harrington's furniture out to the drive in front of the store. Low to the ground, handmade wooden cradles for real babies, as if mothers still rock them with their feet while they work their spinning wheels. Cradles for dolls, high chairs, stools, and cupboards carved with hearts and flowers. Some items Louise had taken on commission, and those Jim had already collected. Some Louise had paid for years ago, at 75% off. She would be taking a huge loss, but Bella knew that if someone didn't buy them, they'd be given away for free to preschools in the area at the end of the day. Around 10, Bella's parents arrived. Dennis took out his digital camera and snapped shots of Louise in front of Barnaby's barn and inside Barnaby's barn, near several of the displays. Gosh, Louise exclaimed. I'd forgotten this was here. Oh, honey, have I been living in the dusty old past? She tilted her face up to Dennis's. He took her hand. Their faces shone with pleasure. Definitely time for a change. Very few people came by. At noon, Aaron arrived with bags of sandwiches and drinks for everyone. They sat at the table under the shade of the tree and chatted, ready to jump up if anyone came, but no one did. In the early afternoon it clouded up, driving a few families away from other activities, and for about an hour Barnaby's barn had a mini rush of business. The hand-smocked children's clothing went to a woman with a victorious glint in her eye. She probably owned a specialty clothing store in some place like Nantucket, where she could sell handmade garments at enormous markups. But fine, Bella thought, more power to her. Shauna Webb stopped by around 4 with some boxes and newspaper and packed up the cow jumped over the moon pottery that hadn't sold. I'm into bellies now anyway, she told Louise and Bella. Excuse me? Louise asked. Porcelain bellies, or thighs, breast, whatever you want, for your coffee table. Bella cleared her throat. People buy porcelain body parts for their coffee tables? You'd be surprised at how well I'm doing. It's the rage. Bella supposed Natalie would understand what Shauna meant, but she couldn't imagine having a belly or thigh just lying there in her living room. But this was an artsy area with a lot of interchange with New York and Boston, and body parts were certainly edgier than children's tea sets. At 5, it was obvious that no one else was coming. They packed the remaining inventory into the back of Dennis's Volvo and Louise's SUV, ready to take the various preschools Monday morning. Louise surprised them all by nodding at Dennis, who brought out a bottle of champagne and their crystal stemware. Goodbye to Barnaby's barn, Dennis toasted. Hello to Bella's. Bella was emotionally choked up. When she took a big sip of champagne, The bubbles went right up her nose, and she physically choked up too. A piece of her history, her childhood, was ending. But her mother laughed, holding her husband's hand and acting like a woman who just had a mountain removed from her shoulders. The Barnabys drove home. Aaron followed in his car. Ben ordered pizza, and they all ate while watching baseball on television for a while, catching up on the Red Sox. Bella put together a platter of grapes, strawberries, and melon slices and set it on the coffee table, next to a platter of cookies. Now, her father said. He clicked the remote and the TV went blank. Your mother and I want to chat just a bit. Bella sucked in a breath. Why did this chat send her anxiety level soaring? She wondered if it had anything to do with Brady, who was over at Zach's for the weekend. Your mother and I have been talking, Dennis announced. Okay, Bella said. Louise said, I don't feel old. Your father doesn't feel old. We are in good health. But Dennis is going to be 60 and he wants to retire. We've decided that while we're both in good health, we want to buy an RV and explore the United States. So we need to think about this house. Our house, Dennis added. We might want to rent it. This isn't about money, it's about our lives. Louise raised her hands as if holding an explanation they could see lying right there, like a scarf or a picture. We love this house, but perhaps we'll want to sell it eventually. It's big for two older people. Stunned, Bella asked, What about Brady? Brady has another year of high school. It's going to take us at least a year to get this house in order for a renter. We've got to go through all the stuff in the basement, attics, bedrooms, the shed. Simplify, Louise said quietly, nodding to herself. Simplify. Dennis continued. We're not saying this is happening tomorrow, Bella. We just want you to know our plans. Louise went on. Nothing is going to happen fast. You'll have plenty of time to make your own plans. And Bella, while we're all sitting down, there's something else you need to know. I can't imagine what more there is. Bella tried not to sound like a petulant child. Beatrice and Jeremy are moving to the Cape. Bella sagged. I was afraid of that. Why are they moving? Ben asked, his voice mild. They love it down there, Louise told them. There's more work for Jeremy, too. The Cape's great, Aaron said. What town? Chatham. Aaron nodded. That's out on the elbow of the Cape. Bella complained. So it's another 30 minutes to get there from Hyannis. You've hardly seen Beat all this summer, her father reminded her. You've been working so hard. She's been so busy with her kids. True, Bella admitted. Brady wants to apply to Stanford for college, Dennis added. Bella echoed, Brady wants to go to California? What next, Ben? Are you moving to Mars? Ben rolled his eyes. Bella, I'm staying right in my apartment in Amherst. So, Dennis concluded, that's our news. These changes are enormous, Bella told her father, her voice soft. Sitting so near him, she noticed how the laugh lines around his eyes had deepened, how thin and gray his hair had grown. And were those age spots on his hand? The world was shifting beneath her feet. She could almost feel it. Her father patted her arm. I'll teach this coming year. I've talked to the principal. I'm giving a year's notice. They're eager to get rid of me anyway, get some new young blood at lower salaries. So nothing, Louise repeated, is really going to happen for a year. Dennis looked at his older son. How do you feel about all of this, Ben? Ben shrugged. Me? I'm fine with it. Me too. Bella forced herself to be happy for her parents. Well, she was happy for them. I'm glad you guys are going to see the country. You'll have a blast. Dennis kissed Bella's forehead. Thanks, Belle. He stood up. Back to the Red Sox. If they don't win this game, they'll be down to fourth place. Aaron stood up too. Bella, want to go for a ride? She didn't know what she wanted to do right now. Sure, she agreed, numb. Aaron said a polite good night to everyone. Bella went out to the door and climbed into the passenger seat of his car. Aaron got in the driver's seat. For a moment, They sat in silence, allowing the steamy night air to fill their lungs. In the distance, a bird called. A lot of developments in one day, Aaron said quietly. Aaron, I'm changing too. I mean, well, I don't know how to express it, but I need to give Bellows a chance. She drew her hands through her hair. Could I be more inarticulate? Aaron was silent for a few moments. I was hoping you'd fly out to San Francisco with me so I could show you around. Aaron, I love it here. She spoke to him, but they were both facing forward as if talking to the windshield. And you love me. She lifted her chin. And you love me. Aaron turned and took Bella in his arms. His eyes glittered in the ambient light falling from the houses around them. I do love you, Bella. That's why I want you to come to San Francisco with me if I get the offer. But if you love me, why can't I say the same thing? That's why I want you to stay here with me, she countered, her voice reasonable. Aaron chuckled. Honey, you can't equate Barnaby's Barn with one of the most distinguished architectural firms in one of the most glamorous cities in the world. It won't be Barnaby's Barn, Bella reminded him. Whatever it's called, it's hardly going to make enough money to support us, is it? Not to mention the children we want to have. He was right. Glumly she nodded agreement. Winston Churchill said, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us." Aaron said, "What?" Bella's fighting spirit was up again. "What does that even mean?" "Come on, Bella. Think of cathedrals, courthouses, the buildings in Washington, D.C. Think of corporate headquarters touching the sky, and compare them to the barn. Is that what you're saying? That your work is so much more significant than mine would be if I ran Bella's? Bella, I love you. I want to marry you. I want to have children with you. I want you to be my wife. I know you've got a talent for putting together antiques and art. You'd go wild about the shops in San Francisco. You could set up your own shop." Aaron sighed. "I just don't get what your problem is." Cruelly, Bella reminded him, "You may not get the job. There are two other candidates." Aaron rubbed his eyes. "Right. Believe me, I think about that constantly." "My painting party's tomorrow," Bella told him. "What?" "The painting party. Everyone's going to help me freshen up the barn. Slade and Natalie, Morgan and Josh. 'Cause it's a Sunday and he's free. Ben and Dad, and Brady too. And you, remember?" Clearly Aaron hadn't remembered. "I didn't realize it was scheduled for tomorrow. So soon. Bella, why don't you wait? I mean, why go to all of that work when—" He let his sentence trail off. "I'm going ahead with it," Bella said. "I've made a lot of plans." Suddenly she wanted to hurt Aaron. "Slade's staying for a few days. He promised to help Ben and my dad move some furniture into the shop next week after the paint dries. You didn't tell me this." "We just agreed on it by email today," Bella explained. "Aaron, you can't be angry with me for discussing the shop with Ben and Slade instead of with you." "No, no, I know you're right about that." He ran his hand over his face. "You know what? We are in what my grandmother would call a pickle." Bella smiled at him, grateful for his attempt to lighten the atmosphere. "I think we should just both go to bed, get some rest, and see where next week takes us. Perhaps I won't get the job, and then I'll have to figure out some new plans for my life. Or perhaps I will get the job and we can talk about it then. What do you think?" "I think you're wonderful, Aaron," Bella told him. They kissed for a while, tender, affectionate kisses, without a trace of urgency or lust. Aaron pulled away. "Good night, Bella." "Night, Aaron." She stepped out of his car and went up the walk to her house, to her parents' house. She slipped inside and made her way up the stairs, calling good night to everyone in the living room before hurrying to the safety of her own room. She was too tired for any more conversation. She threw herself on her bed. She heard Aaron's car start up and drive away. Chapter 16. Morgan absolutely could not believe it. It was Sunday, and Josh had gone into work. Furthermore, he'd gotten up before she had and sneaked out of the house like a ferret, leaving her a note on the kitchen table. Have to work. Sorry. Have to work. Sorry. She was so angry she burst into tears. They really had to talk because this was no way to live. It was summer. It was Sunday. They'd made plans to help Bella paint, taking turns playing with Petey, and then their new gang would get together for beers and burgers afterward. And all of a sudden, without forewarning, Morgan, without even having the decency to wake her this morning and talk to her about it, or sit down last night and explain it to her, Josh just took off. She dialed his office phone. He didn't answer. She dialed his cell. No answer. Straight to voicemail. She said, Josh, you'd better call me. When her cell trilled, she snatched it up. Hey, Morgan, it's Bella. Ready to paint? I am, but Josh has gone into Bio Green, and I don't know when he's coming back. She knew her voice had taken on a note of self-pity, and she tried to sound less pathetic. But she added, so I don't know if I can help, because I've got Petey, and Petey and paint are a sure recipe for disaster. Can Felicity babysit? I'll call her, Morgan said. Good. Let me know when you're ready. You can ride down with me. Felicity was thrilled to babysit, but Morgan still felt cranky as she threw on shorts and an old tank top and slammed out of her gorgeous, husbandless house. As they settled in Louise's SUV, Morgan said, Don't even ask me why Josh had to work. Well, too bad for him, Bella sympathized. Morgan glared at Bella. Too bad for him? Too bad for me and Petey. We never see him. He's always working. And why couldn't he at least have woken me up to tell me he was going in? Perhaps because he knew you'd be angry, Bella suggested. Morgan snorted. She felt like Bella was taking Josh's side. Men and their work, Bella continued, and now her own voice grew thick with discontent. Aaron really wants to take the job in San Francisco. San Francisco is amazing, Morgan said quietly. So everyone says. Bella was practically shooting sparks. She was suddenly so fired up. Why is a big city better than a small town? Why is his dream more important than mine? I didn't realize Bella's has been a dream of yours, Morgan said. Bella inhaled deeply. I didn't realize it either. She grinned a bit sheepishly. I've been such a good girl, doing what was expected of me all my life. Reaching, teaching because Dad taught and I admire him. Coming home to help Mom when she fell. The, the shop idea is new to me too, but Morgan, it's so strong, getting stronger every day. It makes me happy thinking about it and excited. Morgan laughed. You sound like you're in love. As they pulled into the parking lot, Morgan suggested, Why not give yourself a chance to see how it works out? It's not like there won't be planes to San Francisco in 4 months or a year. It's not like you can't visit Aaron, and he'll come back and visit you. Who knows? You might get bored with the shop, but you don't have to make a huge black and white decision now. Bella brightened. You're right. I know. Grinning, she added, Since you put it so well, want to tell Aaron for me? No, Morgan said, getting out of the car. I want to paint. Ben, Louise, Dennis, and Brady arrived with buckets of paint, brushes, rollers, plastic sheets, masking tape, and ladders. They divided up the work. The men would take the outside, the women the inside. Natalie showed up with her brother. She slipped inside without talking to the men, and Slade ambled in after her. Hey, ladies! He wore ratty old jeans and an Arcade Fire t-shirt. Morgan, he said, coming close to her, I've got something for you in my van. Is it the settee? Would you like it to be the settee? He teased. His grin was roguish. Slade flirted as he breathed. Could he do one without doing the other? He jerked his head toward the door. Come out and I'll show you. Morgan was aware of how Bella was staring at her. A glint of, could it really be suspicion in her sweet blue eyes? It's a piece of furniture for our living room, she called to Bella. Slade's emailed me photos and I've been eager to see it. I'll be right back. She hoped Bella got the tactic message. And I'm not going to have sex with Slade because I'm mad at my husband. Although that was not the most repulsive thought she'd ever had. Stop it, Morgan told herself. Concentrate. She followed Slade out to the van. He keyed the doors open so she could peer inside. The white Victorian settee was protected by sheets of bubble wrap and held in place with wide straps. It looks perfect, Morgan said. Want to go over now and put it in your house? Slade asked. It wouldn't take long, and then this afternoon, when you walk in, it will be in place. You'll be able to tell how you react to it. I don't know. We should be painting, helping Bella. Morgan tilted her head questioningly at Slade. Shouldn't we? Slade rolled his eyes at her twinge of conscience. We'll paint, but let's move this while we've got the energy. He ran his eyes over Morgan. I think you and I can do it. We won't need Josh. Good thing, Morgan muttered. Josh isn't around. Oh? He's at work. On a Sunday? Don't ask. Morgan went around to the passenger side of the van and climbed in. They drove out of the parking lot just as Aaron was pulling in. This will make Bella happy, Morgan said, waving at Aaron. What? That Aaron showed up? Slade didn't seem particularly interested. Morgan filled him in on the whole dilemma. Aaron wanting to move to San Francisco, Bella wanting to stay here. How would they decide? Aaron would know this week if he got the job in San Francisco. Yeah, marriage, Slade said, cramps your style. It certainly does, Morgan agreed. Slade looked over at her. Cramps your style? Slade, I'm trained in biosafety. I know how to handle bacterial and parasitic agents. I've written a pamphlet on sewage spills. Whoa, Slade yelled. That's extreme. You are completely grossing me out. Morgan gave a wicked laugh. The things I could tell you. Please don't. What would dream Who would dream you were so squeamish? Who would dream a babe like you enjoying sewage spills? Ah, Morgan bantered. Now you're getting sexist. Anyway, I didn't say I enjoyed sewage spills. Come on, you implied as much. Anyway, what do you mean? What do you enjoy? The safety aspect of it, Morgan replied instantly. I love knowing how to protect people from the things they don't even realize are dangerous. For example, Slade, let's say there's a blockage in the dorm toilet. Normal, right? Happens every day. A custodian's dealing with the problem could be exposed, which could lead to something entering his digestive system and causing bacterial disease, like salmonella or hepatitis A, to start with. He might have symptoms like vomiting, fever, abdominal pain, diarrhea. Okay, stop. Slade shuddered. You are the weirdest chick I've ever met. Well, Slade, you have to understand. I've got a master's in biosafety. I don't go around campus with rubber gloves cleaning up shit. I supervise, I run programs, I train, and I test people as well as equipment. I do most of my work at the computer and at the phone. I work with an enormous team. Morgan went quiet. After a moment, she said, rather, I worked with an enormous team at Wethersfield College. I gave it up to come here with Josh because he got a plum job at BioGreen. They'd arrived at her house. Slade pulled into the drive. I'll unlock the door and just check the house phone, she told Slade hurriedly. Josh hadn't called her on her cell yet. He hadn't called on the house phone either. She fixed the screen door to remain fully open and went back down the steps to the van. Slade was inside, undoing the packing straps. Morgan climbed up to join him. It was warm, shady, even gloomy inside the van. Let's edge it to the end, then I'll jump down and take it until you have to get down, Slade instructed. We can rest it on the floor while you jump down. Morgan checked to be sure her hands were clean. The settee was so white, but it was protected by lots of bubble wrap. She hefted the far end of the settee and moved slowly forward as Slade inched backward. You're at the edge, she called. Don't fall. Thanks, Mom. Slade jumped down. Raising his arms, he took the far end of the settee and carried it out of the van into the light of the day, pausing for Morgan to jump down. Together they lugged it across the lawn, up the steps, and through the open door into the house. They turned into the living room and gently positioned it at the spot in front of the window facing the street. "Got scissors?" Slade asked. He wasn't even sweating, despite the hot day, but Morgan was puffing after carrying the solid oak piece of furniture. "I'll get scissors and some ice water," she told him, and went off to the kitchen. She returned to find Slade lifting one end of the settee to slide protective rubber squares beneath the ornate mahogany claw feet. She handed him the scissors, not sure where to start the process of unveiling, and stood back to watch. He sliced at the top, cutting quickly and surely, and before long they were both tearing at the wrap, pulling it away to expose the exquisite carved, curled, and embossed back and arms of the settee, and the arctic white silk of the seat and back. "What was I thinking?" Morgan chuckled. "Petey will turn this into a mandarin in 2 minutes." "Really?" Slade asked, looking at Morgan. "Actually," she replied, "maybe not. Mostly he plays in the kitchen, or the den, or his playroom, or his bedroom. In fact, Josh and I are hardly ever in the living room unless we have company. Lots of rooms in this house." Slade had an odd expression on his face. He said, "Let's sit on it." "What?" "Sit on it. The new settee. It is a piece of furniture meant for sitting on. Don't you want to try it out?" He wasn't sweating yet. He gave off heat. Or no, not heat. More like an exotic incense, as if he were some sort of plant she wanted to lean into and inhale. Why did Morgan suddenly feel so flustered? "Of course." She pretended more enthusiasm than she felt. "It's just—" Bending, she tried to scan the back of her shorts. "They're clean," Slade told her. "So are mine." Morgan sat down on the new settee. Not at the far end, because that might seem rude, but not in the middle either. Oh, she hadn't expected it to be quite so cushy. "When we refurbished it, we added foam stuffing to make it softer. When they were first built, the seats contained horsehair and were about as hard as wood." Slade sat down next to Morgan. Their arms almost touched. It had been a long time since Morgan had been alone in a room with a full grown male other than Josh. "It's luxurious," she said, running her hand over the silk. She was aware of her bare legs extending from the hem of her shorts. His legs, next to hers, were longer, leaner. She was aware of her bare arms, her bare neck. "It suits you," Slade said, and he ran his eyes up and down her body. She knew she should pull away, stand up, grab her glass of ice water, and hold it to her burning cheek. But she only croaked. "Ha! First time anyone's equated me with luxury." "I think you're very luxurious," Slade assured her, angling his body toward hers. He lightly touched her hair, which she'd pulled up in a high ponytail to keep it out of the way when painting. Such thick, glossy hair, skin like satin. He drew the tip of one finger down the side of her face, down her neck, stopping at her collarbone. "Slade, did you know this old settee is long enough for most people to lie down on, to sleep on, or whatever?" She could feel his warm breath on her cheek. He looked like some dark prince materialized from one of the Gothic romances she'd read as a teenager. And he had said what no one else in the world had ever said about her, that her skin was like satin. Turning, she rammed her face at his before she could change her mind, and smashed a kiss on his mouth. Taken by surprise, and by the force of her lunge, Slade fell backward, but he was quick enough to wrap his arms around her and pull her with him. On top of him, they tangled together on the white satin, adjusting arms, torsos, mouths. Slade was too tall